to the Plant-Based Asia Summit, where we inspire a healthier and more sustainable Asia Pacific. My name is Luke, your co-host, and today I'm extremely excited to introduce to you the next two speakers, Jonathan Edwards and Eleanor Good. I'm going to hand you over to Jonathan to introduce himself.
Great. Well, first of all, Luke, thanks for having us. This is so, I was saying to you when we spoke earlier, this is so the kind of event I would come to because I love anything plant-based, anything summity. So summit plus plant-based, awesome. But yeah, I'll go first in terms of introducing ourselves, right? So I am, as you said, I'm the CEO of Nuzest USA, which is the American branch, the United States branch of the company Nuzest, which is a plant-based nutrition company. And I'll try and keep it short. How I became both a vegan and in the plant-based industry selling vegan supplements are kind of like parallel stories. So first of all, being in this industry, in the nutrition industry, was literally I'd sold my skateboard company. I was already planning to come to the US. And my friend Claire, who used to work for me in the skateboard company, said, "Hey, can you help me and my dad launch this, brand in New Zealand?" And her dad, Claire, Jeff, were the distributors for New Zealand, and they were literally launching it back in 2012. And I'm like, okay, I love talking to people about things and selling and whatever. And I just jumped into it. And after going around the country talking to people about this product, this clean, plant-based, and I wasn't vegan at the time. But after going around and just selling it to people, first of all, it was way easier to sell than skateboards and clothing. Secondly, I hadn't taken protein powder or any kind of supplement since I was a teenager, and I loved it. I loved how clean it tasted. I loved how I felt afterwards. And so after a year, we'd become like the best selling or one of the best selling plant-based proteins in the whole country, like literally in the space of a year. And I said to Trevor, who's one of the co-founders, the founder and CEO of the brand globally, can I bring this to the US? And he, gave me a shot and said yes. And so I brought it to the US. We launched in 2014. And it's just been a love affair with the brand and the industry ever since. Now, my story with being vegan literally was completely random. My dad sent me this text one day over, text, and said, "Have you seen dairy is scary?" And I was like, "What are you talking about, Dad?" And he's like, "Yeah, check it out, Erin Janice, this video." And so I went on YouTube and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's all about being a vegan, da da da." And I'd made a mental note to never watch any of those kinds of videos or movies or anything. Like I loved meat. I loved everything, low carb and blah, blah, blah. I used to do the Atkins diet. I mean, I was like the opposite of a vegan. And I just binge watched everything. And by the time I was done, I was like totally just persuaded in every way, shape or form and form. And my dad's health after becoming a vegan he literally went off beta blockers and had this heart condition, and he became a vegan and it all cleared up. And I became a vegan and I'd always had high cholesterol. And within like 1 month of becoming a vegan, my cholesterol went from dangerously high to almost ideal. So I was totally sold on both the animal cruelty side of it. Like, I love animals. And so finally I was getting connected to the sort of cognitive dissonance of like not caring about what I was eating and loving animals and actually bringing them together. And then 2, that it's good for the planet, and 3, that it's good for one's body. So and that was about 4 years ago that I became a vegan, and I'm like as passionate and militant of a vegan as you can be. So that's my story. Over to you, Al.
I don't know how to follow that. But I am actually lucky enough to work with Johnny at Nuzest, but I do work in our HQ office in Sydney. I work as the executive assistant to Trevor Bolland, who Johnny mentioned is our CEO and co-founder of the company. But I am a nutritionist. So I'm accredited, as you mentioned, with the Australian Traditional Medicine Society. And I do work, not only in the office, but I do see clients on the side, which basically allows me to have that great exposure to both industry and private practice, which, make sure you're on top of all of the research, but, you really do need exposure to both sides to be the best practitioner you can possibly be. And it really helps you to, decipher between what is a quality supplement and what isn't, particularly when it comes to prescribing those things for your clients. So I'm really passionate about empowering my clients through education to live better lives, basically through good nutrition.
Amazing, Jonathan and Elle. I mean, empowering your clients with education, and that's what I shared earlier when we first met. Education is the word as well, especially on a plant-based diet. And with nutrition and supplementation, and I kind of want to go into that right now as well. From what I know, Nuzest is the cleanest plant-based market-leading protein that is family-run. It's also a premium brand in the market for the past almost 10 years. And what draws my attention to the brand is it's clean, okay? Why is clean supplementation important for your health?
I mean, I think the most important thing is, manufacturers and brand owners really do have a responsibility. They're producing products for clients and customers, that are consuming these products on a daily basis. And so, when you're purchasing products from a brand, you really want to know that those products are clean and, that they aren't, there's labeling regulations that mean that people can essentially get away with leaving things off, ingredient declaration. So you really want to make sure that when you're purchasing a product, the ingredients list is clean, is minimal. You recognize those ingredients. They're not, there's not a bunch of fillers, artificial substances. You want it to be as close to a food product as possible, really, because, you're supplementing for the benefit of getting the nutrients. It's another form of nutrients. You're not trying to you're just trying to optimize your diet. So the only way to optimize that is through clean products that are as close to nature as possible. And that's what you want to look for.
Amazing. So I guess if we want to backtrack a little bit, supplementation, because having spoken to doctors in the summit and previous summits as well, they said that, okay, you can get it all from whole foods. You just have your flax seeds, you just have your walnuts, you get all the protein you need, and spinach is 40% protein. So why would someone need to consider supplementation in the first place if they're plant-based, if whole foods has it all?
And I mean, we personally, and also at Nuzest, we always advocate for food first. You can't make changes to your life by loading up on a bunch of supplements that claim to solve all of your problems. The very basic foundation of self-care is getting nutrition from food. So, if you're not eating a well-balanced diet that contains, a plethora of nutrients from whole foods, there's nothing you can do with supplements. It has to come from food first. So, there are so many reasons why supplementation is so important. And I think it really comes down to, not only do modern agricultural practices and farming methods mean that the nutritional quality of the food themselves is less than what it was. We know, I think it was the US Department of Agriculture actually, claimed that the fresh produce these days compared to the 50s is 50% less as nutritious than what it was back then. So, micronutrient deficiencies are actually incredibly common and probably more common than people realize. And it really comes down to that question of, do you want to thrive or are you just trying to survive? And, it comes down to physical activity levels, to be able to absorb all of the nutrients from your food. It comes down to your gut function, and gut function is something that is so crucial to our overall health that unless you're actually, any kind of symptoms of digestive dysfunction can basically indicate there's a good chance you're not going to be absorbing everything from your food. So not only is the food less nutritious than it once was, there's a good chance you're not absorbing everything from that food. And then if you really think about the national guidelines and the recommendations about, what level of micronutrients or macronutrients even that you're supposed to consume per day, they were based off, quite healthy, average healthy populations. They didn't factor in things like lean muscle mass, which varies obviously for everybody, physical activity levels, bone density. It does factor in age, but it doesn't factor in biological difference and metabolic age, which people vary. Your age is not necessarily your age, or how your body feels and, is thriving. So, and then, there's things, genetic conditions, chronic conditions, there's so health is individual, and the supplementation can support people in actually achieving their health goals. A lot of the time we think about, you go to the doctor if something's wrong, you go and you need medicine. Nutritional supplements are essentially ingredients that we know the body needs to perform biochemical processes. We're essentially just making sure that if you're deficient, you're actually getting those nutrients that you actually need, because your body can't perform without them. So it comes down to just trying to give the body what it needs to thrive. And supplementation isn't therapeutic dose. Supplementation doesn't need to be long-term. But it can definitely help you get to your goals sooner. So if you're, low in energy, where are you at with your B vitamins, your magnesium? If you're feeling your immune function is not performing the way it should, you're getting colds regularly, where are your antioxidant nutrients or your fat soluble vitamins? Are you getting enough sunshine? What are your vitamin D levels? Because we know the role of vitamin D in regulating immune function, and particularly autoimmunity, which is on the rise globally. So there's so many reasons. But again, it comes down to individual needs, and health is incredibly individual. So without understanding what you need personally and looking at, very carefully your medical history, whether, what your diet is actually like day in, day out, your physical activity levels, you really need to have those assessed individually to know what you might need, because there is no one size fits all for nutrition.
100%.
Can I jump in and say something about that as well?
Of course, Jonathan.
Al triggered a couple of things for me. Just, one of the things, if I put myself in like the one category of person, I'm running a business. I am starting early in the morning. I'm not stopping sometimes till late at night. I'm not saying that everybody should do that, but sometimes that's quite often how my days go. And I consumed so much, awesome content about whole food. And I'm like, couldn't be more sold on whole food, plant-based, right? But the reality is I don't always have the time to stop. So the other thing for me is it's not even like, I don't always have the time to stop and make the kind of nutritious meal. I might do that once a day, but doing it 3 times a day or twice a day. Yeah. And even meal planning and prep, like I can't tell you the number of times I've started off my week with the best intention of like planning out my meals, and I'll even stock my fridge full of like the right foods. And it gets to Wednesday, I'm like, oh gosh, I didn't prepare this. And now I have to throw out the vegetables, which feels like a cardinal sin, but never mind. And, I'll grab my like clean supplementation, and it's not a substitute for real food. But it definitely, I tell you what, it makes a huge difference. And I am like talking about metabolic age, right? I was just, saying to you earlier, I'm turning 44 tomorrow. And I tell you, I feel the difference between how I was when I was 20. That test that you do to find out your metabolic age, like try and stand up from being cross-legged without using your hands. And I thought I could do it. And the other day I tried doing it and I couldn't. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting old. The point is, that's an individual health concern. I'm not the same as somebody in their 20s necessarily. And having that supplementation to support me with my energy, but particularly being on the go and running a team and going all day long, that makes all the difference. And then also getting older, I need that little bit more protein. I don't always get that. I was thinking I'm getting it from all my food. And I am totally sold on if you have enough calories, you're likely to get a good, adequate amount of protein, but not necessarily, because I train, I go full on for my health and for my energy. It doesn't work. So anyway, just to sort of come in as a lay person and jump in on that, like with my individual health needs, I've found it makes a difference. Even though in an ideal world, everything would be from my vegetable garden, everything would be whole food,
Yeah.
you know?
I think that's a really good point, Johnny, because it really comes down to, you know, not only do you need to have perfect digestive function to be absorbing all of the nutrients from your food, the nutritional quality of the food is not always, you know, it isn't what it once was. And then thirdly, who has the time day in and day out to plan a perfectly balanced diet? And the average person wouldn't know how to plan the perfect balanced diet to make sure they met every single micronutrient need. And sadly, the fact is micronutrient deficiencies do occur, and they don't occur overnight. They're something that, you know, they gradually develop. And, you know, next thing you know, you get a blood test, you realize you're actually low in iron, or, you know, maybe your vitamin D isn't where it should be for optimal health. But it's, you know, it really does go a long way in optimizing and enhancing your diet.
I agree very much, definitely. And I mean, firstly, for what picking up on what you said, Eleanor, food first where possible. And
Without
also,
a doubt.
Jonathan, 100% food first above every, because you can't out supplement a bad diet.
Without
So
a doubt.
that's
Yeah.
number one. And number two is I resonate with what you're saying as well, Johnny. Because, you know, when I'm on the go, I remember traveling to the US, long 27, 28-hour trips. And then you go to airports, and airport food is really bad. Sometimes you just have no access to quality food, quality nutrients. I mean, I'm vegan as well, so I order the vegetarian. And who gives a veggie stack as a main, like, or, you know, like, or you get a cauliflower, you get a carrot, and oh wow, you get 4 zucchinis, and that's your main.
Yeah.
And it's zapped in the microwave. So I definitely agree that at some point you need to just kind of first look at your food, and the next aspect would be consider supplementation. So where supplementation is concerned, you know, we talked about you mentioned briefly about the protein aspect, and, you know, as they say, you know, where you get your protein on a plant-based diet. Well, I get it from my spinach because it's 40% protein. I get it from tofu cafe, and everything is protein. So with that in mind, why should someone consider a plant-based protein supplement in the first place, when really, you know, if we want to look from the lens of whole foods, you get all that you need. You don't really need that much protein anyway. I mean, as we now know, there is an overemphasis on protein, especially people who aren't plant-based. They say, all right, you need 2 times body weight, you need 3 times body weight, and that has been proven untrue. So, but in the case of the listeners and viewers watching today, why would someone consider it?
You know, we come back to this factor of health is individual, and you really want to, you know, yes, protein deficiency is rare, but that it again, you know, whether you're consuming adequate protein to thrive rather than just survive, that there's a big difference in that. So, you know, maintaining, you know, making sure you're actually maintaining a positive net protein balance to maintain muscle synthesis is so important. You know, we all know as we age, sarcopenia, which is basically muscle wasting, you know, from the age of 30, that starts. Unless you're actively making sure you're consuming adequate protein to make sure, you know, you never go into that negative protein balance, you know, you just need to slow the process of aging. Go for it.
Maybe I want to kind of stop you there. For those viewers that don't understand what the protein balance is, maybe you could just unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's essentially, you know, our body, to try to explain that, our body essentially maintains a pool of amino acids, and we do know that we need to get all of the essential amino acids from our food. They're not ones that our body can produce. So, you know, that's why you often hear these people talking about, you know, you need to have animal protein because it contains all of the essential amino acids. But the fact is, you know, the animals essentially get their amino acids from the plants. It's just the fact that they assimilate them in their body. And that's why when we consume animal proteins, they are complete because that animal has already assimilated them for you if you were to eat an animal product. But because that is not the focus here, you know, we really, want to think about when we are consuming essential amino acids, we just need to know that we do have to consume them. There was this really old way of thinking where you had to consume complete proteins with every meal. We now know that that is, it's outdated. As long as you're consuming adequate energy in the day to meet your activity levels, adequate protein per day, and making sure you're having a source of protein with every meal, of plant protein with every meal, your body does maintain that amino acid pool for lean muscle synthesis. So it just basically means that you never dip into that negative protein balance where your muscles aren't actively maintaining that lean muscle. So you really want, people probably don't realize how important it is to maintain our lean muscle, particularly as we age. Metabolically, staying active, consuming adequate protein and eating a well-balanced diet basically reduces the risks associated with so many chronic conditions. But the higher muscle mass we actually have, the more we're able to control our triglycerides and our cholesterol, our blood glucose. It plays such a key role in maintaining our health as we age, but particularly, keeping mobile, keeping flexible, making sure we can actually support our body structures. So protein really is, people try not to focus on it, but unless you know how much you need, again, you just need to make sure you're having enough to thrive. That's what it comes down to. Don't choose to kind of only consume the bare minimum. They're actually saying the average person that's active, and that means, participating in 60 minutes of activity a day, really should be consuming between 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of their body weight. So for the average 60 kilogram woman, that's 90 grams of protein. And, that is a lot of beans, tofu, tempeh. So sometimes, having that scoop of protein powder in your smoothie with your nut butter can go a really long way in helping you thrive and essentially make sure you are maintaining that positive protein balance.
Such a good point there, definitely having that scoop of protein. And that's what someone actually asked me that question, why should someone supplement? Because if we're looking at, for example, who's in a fitness space or bodybuilder, because if we look at the caloric content to get the same amount of protein, like a cup of black beans for 30 grams of protein might be 450 calories. However, if we look at plant-based protein powder, that might just be 150 calories. So if someone wants to still hit that positive protein balance,
whilst maintaining a healthy weight.
Whilst maintaining a healthy weight, a plant-based protein powder could definitely be an option. So with that in mind, what I've read as well, in a few years ago, there was a Clean Label project that they did some research on proteins in the market, and they showed, with whey against plant-based protein powders. And plant-based protein powders came up on top as the most toxic, with heavy metals, with all these chemicals and pesticides. So I guess being a clean plant-based protein supplement company, maybe you can share for the viewers out there, if they want to start supplementing with a plant-based protein powder, what should they start looking for? Because as you see, like Optimum Nutrition, who's not a non-plant-based protein company, is suddenly having a vegan protein because there's a market share in there. I wanna have an offering to the vegans. But the thing is that there's so many vegan proteins out there. So I'm discerning, so I know how to check. But for someone who's quite new to this, how would they kind of search, and what do they need to look for?
Yeah, I think the key things really are, if it's making a decision to buy a brand you've never bought before, or a product you've never bought before, do your research. You have to commit to doing the research. So you want to look at that brand and you want to understand their manufacturing processes and their supply chain. So reach out to them. Ask them where their crop is, like, I guess specifically speaking to Nuzest, it makes a lot of sense because it's easy to talk to, but we use a pea that's grown in northern France, because we know, we selected this supplier because we know specifically that the soil is incredibly nutrient rich, which means a better nutrition profile for the pea itself, the finished product. And it also means, it's an area that we know is lower in air, soil, and water pollution, which basically means that, the finished product essentially is as low as possible in natural contaminants, which, the soils essentially do contain a natural level of these heavy metals, because, farming practices, chemicals that we use on crops, naturally that's just what's happened over time in soil. Pollution essentially, is in the soil. So we selected this supplier for the reason that it is an incredibly clean, or the cleanest possible crop that we could possibly find. Not only that, but they do use a water-based isolation process, which is pretty rare. It's a patented process that literally relies on water and sodium only to cleave the amino acids from the pea, the extraction process. There can be a lot of artificial chemicals involved in that extraction process of other products. So you want to make sure that you understand the isolation process, you understand where they're sourcing their raw materials from, and you want to know that you can contact a brand and that they have no hesitations in answering your questions. You want to make sure you feel like you're treated like an individual. Whenever you have a question for a brand about whether a product is safe for you, they should have no hesitation in answering the questions. You want to make sure you're checking for allergens. Are there allergens present that you need to be mindful of? Look at the ingredients list. You'll be able to read an ingredients list and decide pretty quickly whether it fits your bill or not. But then also, just building a bit of brand trust with them by reaching out to them. You'll know as soon as you hear back from that brand whether it's a brand that you want to trust in and purchase from.
With that in mind, I think that's what I love about you guys, because Scott is a mutual friend of ours. He's the Asia-based distributor, and I remember seeing a post by Dr. Gonzalez because I interviewed him and Dr. Vivian Chen, who did that big post on plant-based protein powders. There was 6 stay away and 6 that they recommended, and Nuzest was one of the ones that they stay away from. And I think I shared that with, if I'm not mistaken, I shared that with Scott, and he's like, "Whoa, okay, that's interesting." And then I think that was when I think Nuzest went to kind of research and respond to that post. So maybe do you have memory of what happened? And
I can say exactly what happened.
Yeah.
To that.
Yes,
please.
I'm glad.
I'll be so interested to hear about it.
Yeah, because that's exactly an example. Like, look, I came to America, like the movie. Coming to America. I came to America in 2014, and one of the things about America is there are 50 states. Everybody knows there are 50 states, and in California, there's a regulation called Prop 65, which is probably one of the most stringent, strict, regulations for chemicals and toxins in one's food, drinking water. It was originally originated for just drinking water, but it's across all sorts of stuff now. And if you go around California, you'll see the Prop 65 warning everywhere, in Starbucks, everywhere. And one of the things that happened is we've tested as a company globally for heavy metals for quite some time. And when Dr. Gonzalez originally came to us about 2 years ago, his assistant literally messaged us through customer service, said, do you have the test? Yes, we sent them back, and they were the tests that got done in Australia to world standards, pretty much standards held by Europe, Asia, like across many countries. They were not tested down to the level of the stringent Prop 65 Californian standards. That was our learning curve. That was our moment of realizing, oh, I see, we're in a different. So then the story continued. A year later, they came back to us because they were doing this review. So Dr. Gonzalez does a regular review. of protein powders. And he, takes all of the plant-based protein powders in the market and calls every single one of them. His assistant, Melissa, who's awesome, calls every single person, every single company, emails them and says, can you send us the, your test results, blah, 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 for heavy metals, right? Pesticides and heavy metals. And so this time we were ready. And, when she emailed, I literally got on the phone with her. We gave her everything because since the last time we'd gotten everything tested to the Prop 65 criteria that is required in California. And of course we passed all the tech. I mean, we were like, so what happened was we sent everything to Dr. Gonzalez. He ended up in that particular review. This was in the last 12 months, maybe 6-7 months ago. My mind isn't exact, but he tested 80, he approached 80 different companies, 80 different protein powders. Guess where he ranked Nuzest after that, approaching 80?
Where?
Number one of the top three. So of the top three, he ranked us one in terms of transparency, being like all over it. And number two, just the results of our tests, like, how good quality, clean, the pesticide tests we gave him, and we do test regularly for that stuff. So, it was a very happy ending to that story. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's definitely your podium finisher for me now, all of a sudden, because I remember like, wow, okay, I saw that post and I saw Nuzest, and then now for it, out of all the 80 to be at the top number one, that is phenomenal. I mean, that is incredible. So, I mean, congratulations, and of course, true testament to what you guys did, and also being forthcoming with opening up the doors for communication. And I think that's important because a lot of times when you reach out to supplement companies, they just go, who are you? Why should I tell you about my testing processes?
And that's true. And that's the thing. A lot of companies don't. They'll say, oh, we don't tell you, that's not information we release. And, we don't look, we're always learning about what people are interested in knowing, etc. But we will never just say no. We're like, oh, we don't have that test on hand, which we have all of the regular stuff that people will be interested in. We have it. If it's something we've never heard of before, we'll do the research. We'll come back to them. We just spent hours on a call last week, me and Alan Trevor, who is the founder and CEO of the company, literally responding to one customer about one product. And I don't know how long we spent, Al. It must have been like collectively, if you add all of our time together, maybe 10 hours or 9 hours. I was
going to say it was a full working day.
Yes. Just to one customer who had a question. So I don't know. That's one thing. If you would ask me what to look for in a company, a company that's actually interested in being transparent, willing to learn and look and respond like that.
Yes.
Amazing. Really, really good to know. Definitely, guys. So I really respect you guys as a company for that. So it's nice to know that backstory even more. So I guess before we kind of wrap up with the takeaways, for those that are new to this as well, Elle, I'd like to ask for you, for heavy metals in plant-based protein powders. So from your perspective, why should someone at a top level be looking out for heavy metals, maybe in plant-based proteins, and what is the impact on health if you're having too much of it?
So when we think about the health risks associated with heavy metal intake, it really is associated with chronic exposure to high levels. So it's not, the negligible levels that you may find in your produce or your fruits and vegetables or your supplements, but some of those health risks are things like gastrointestinal and kidney dysfunction, nervous system disorders, developmental concerns in children, skin lesions, which are essentially atopy, vascular damage, and things like immune system dysfunction and autoimmunity. So we know that exposure to exogenous toxins, so those in our environment, really can contribute to these autoimmune presenting type symptoms. So the sources of contamination, we know for a fact, and the World Health Organization will put it plainly, is that soils are one of the biggest contaminators of our fresh produce. When it's the soils, it's, we're thinking about the pesticides, the herbicides, the fertilizers. So it's certain chemicals that we use in the growing of produce and protecting them from, things like weeds and bugs that we want to keep away from our crops to make sure they produce great crops that essentially can be quite harmful to humans. If they're harmful to pests, they're harmful to humans. So we just need to be mindful of, not only where we're purchasing our fresh produce from, but bear in mind that it really comes down to the soils that they're grown in for, what the soil, the fresh produce essentially absorbs those toxins from the soil. It's not just the soil, it's things like the tap water, so irrigation. One thing that's really important to bear in mind, we're living in a really sustainable time where sustainability is such a big theme, and people are doing more of grow your own. But one thing to be incredibly cautious of is that if you're growing your own fresh produce at home, we know that industrialized soils, so nearby roads or nearby, so the car fumes essentially are quite high in those toxins, or if even the previous building, so having building sites near where you essentially live, or the previous building of your home has essentially put things like heavy metals into those soils. So then the heavy metal content of those soils is much higher, and growing your own basically means that there's higher potential for your fresh produce that you're growing from a sustainability perspective to be higher in those contaminants. We know that things like berries, avocados, leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, they really absorb nutrients from the soil, and they're also, they require a lot more pesticides and herbicides to protect those crops. So they are one of the highest contaminants for things like heavy metals. So you have to be mindful of where you're purchasing things from. But our body does actually have a natural ability to protect us from these contaminants. So it's really important to remember that it's how you're living as a whole. So your diet plays a key role in supporting your body's natural detoxification processes. So if you're having this whole food plant-based diet, yes, there's risk of consuming some heavy metals, but your body is actually, you're also feeding it the nutrients it needs to filter those out the best way that it can. When it comes to heavy metals in supplements, you usually find the levels are far lower than that in natural produce or our fresh, fruits and veggies that we're eating. But if you do want to feel confident to speak to the brand that you're purchasing from. So ask them if they've ever tested the product for heavy metals, ask them if they can share those test results with you, and make sure you can actually see the date that test was actually run on, and make sure it's quite a recent test that's been analyzed. You'll get a really good feeling from speaking to the brand that you want to purchase from about, whether they're aware of these kinds of contaminants and whether they're aware of them, not only aware of them, but, consciously making an effort to reduce the levels of heavy metals. So that's really important.
Never thought of it that way, growing your own fruits and veggies with industrialized soil, because that is where the fruits and vegetables get their nutrients from. So wow,
Yeah.
I never thought about. So thank you for bringing that up. And yeah, I agree. Especially we're being on the Plant-Based Asia Summit. A whole plant-based diet is really, I may be biased, some people may say optimal. I'm going to say it out there, it is optimal because it is what us humans are meant to consume. And I mean, as they say, it's a Swiss Army knife of nutrition, because it's one tool for many users, whether it's chronic disease reversal, whether it's athletic performance recovery, and also, of course.
Yeah. I was just going to say, when you were saying before, it comes down to the principles that nutritionists practice, which is food as medicine. And a whole food plant-based diet can be a preventative form of medicine for so many of the diseases that we're faced with today, for sure.
Indeed. And I think a lot of the diseases that we face today, the bare bones of it is chronic inflammation at some level, at some capacity. And being a diet that's high in antioxidants, that is anti-inflammatory, it combats that chronic inflammation, and that's why people heal and drop tons of weight, live to 150, maybe not 150, 105. I'd love to meet that guy. 105 in Loma Linda and some of the blue zones. So just to kind of wrap up this conversation, I mean, you shared a lot from the toxicity in our soil to supplementation to protein. Maybe you could just kind of leave the audience with some three key takeaway points for them to just say, all right, I'm going to start doing this from today after this conversation onwards.
Mm-hmm.
You want,
All right,
John,
well,
you want to give a couple takeaways and then I'll give
I'll
some.
yeah, and then exactly. So I mean, one, I think we covered food first.
Yeah.
You know, commit. You know, even though I kind of bagged meal planning a little bit, that doesn't mean dismiss it. Like, actually think through what you want to eat, meal plan, and learning to love that. I mean, I never loved cooking until I became vegan. I never loved it, and it's one of my favorite things to do. And I'm the one who cooks in my house with my girlfriend, right? So that's first thing, food first. And health is individual, right? I have different needs than somebody who's maybe 20 years younger, or somebody who's doing, I'm pretty active, but there are people who are more active than me. They may have higher protein needs, for example. The other thing is, like, some people are looking to manage hunger cravings or managing their weight, which I've quite frankly always battled with. And having a clean plant-based protein drink, for example, keeps me satiated. So health as individual would be number two. And supplementation can support you in thriving. You know, I looked up the dictionary definition of supplement before today's interview, and it says something that completes or enhances something else when added to it. That's the dictionary dictionary definition of supplementation or supplement. And it really is like that. It can enhance your already great diet if you're doing great diet. So those would be my three. Al, I know you've probably got a couple of others you'd give people.
Key things that I really want to get across here are, and the best takeaways, make sure if you're thinking about supplementing, you do speak to a complementary medicine provider. You know, you really want to think about, you know, they'll be the best support for you in terms of understanding your pre-existing medical conditions. But again, if you have pre-existing medical conditions, you want to make sure any supplements provided to you from a complementary medicine provider are checked with your doctor as well, just to make sure that, you know, it is safe for you and if you're taking medication. But they'll really be able to understand your physical activity levels, what you need individually to thrive on a baseline health level, your diet, lifestyle, things that maybe you could boost in your diet. You really want to make sure, just get the advice from somebody who actually has the knowledge to support you and the ability to support you in an educated way. The second thing I want to say is make sure, if you're curious about supplementation and it's not necessarily, it's more of an over-the-counter style supplement, feel confident that you can speak to the brands that you're purchasing from to get the information that you need, and do your research. So make sure that, you know, if it's thinking about what nutrients are actually in there, do the research about what the bioavailable forms of those ingredients are, and does that supplement contain them? What are optimal levels of those micronutrients? Does that supplement contain them? So do your research. And again, if you're struggling to do that research, know that you can, again, speak to a complementary medicine provider about what that ideal supplement is for you. And the final thing I want to say is, don't forget that your body has an innate ability to heal itself and thrive. Our bodies are literally designed to thrive given the right environment. And, you know, through a plant-based whole food diet, you can totally do that. Supplements are there when you need them. You know, just do what you need to do, essentially. Put yourself in the right environment to give your body the best ability it can to thrive.
Amazing. Great takeaways, Johnny and Elle. I just wanted to thank you very much for all that you've shared, and also supporting the summit.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Us.
And one last thing, Luke, because Elle and I were talking about before today, and we were thinking, okay, there's a lot that's been covered, and we wanted to make sure that people weren't just overwhelmed, because it's night. I don't know about you guys, but when I listen to something for 45 minutes, I'm like, oh, that's great, and that's great, and that's great, and what should I remember? And I didn't take notes, or blah blah blah. So we're going to include a cheat sheet for people, that like a link to a PDF that people can like get the cliff notes or the key things from today's interview below. And also for people who are interested in Nuzest, the story behind Nuzest is really inspiring. And I think people get a lot of, as an example of a plant-based nutrition brand, and one that you can trust and that's transparent and comes from integrity and efficacy, there's a little link that we'll provide that people can, for whoever's interested, to check out.
Yes.
Amazing,
Awesome.
guys. Awesome. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you so much, Luke.
Yay.
All the best for the rest of the summit.
Thank
Great.
you.